Hi, in this video I will show you how I draw backgrounds. First step is composing a scene. I begin by creating a rough sketch of what I want the drawing to look like. I always try to divide the scene into foreground, middle ground and background. It's important to make the characters stand out from the background. Once the sketch is complete, I start drawing a perspective grid. This isn't necessary, but it helps and makes the line arting process a lot more streamlined. You can draw a perspective grid by hand or use a tool like the perspective ruler in Clip Studio Paint. First, I will show you how I draw it by hand. The perspective grid is composed of 3 axes, the horizontal X, vertical Y and rotational Z. I create a separate layer for each of them. I begin drawing the axis by choosing the vanishing point. Then I just draw straight lines coming from the point to the edges of the canvas. In the case of this drawing, I wanted the perspective to be straightforward. So for the X and Y axis I just drew straight and perpendicular lines. The vanishing point is sometimes located outside the area of the canvas. In those cases I simply eyeball the location of the lines. If you don't feel confident drawing it yourself, you can always use a photo or a 3D model as a base for your scene. Now I will explain how to use the perspective ruler in Clip Studio Paint because it can be a little tricky. The tool creates a vanishing point on one axis by drawing 2 converging lines. You have to do this separately for each of the 3 axes. Once you create the vanishing point, the straight lines will automatically be drawn in perspective, as long as the perspective ruler layer is visible. To change which axis you're drawing on, just switch the layer's visibility. And remember to turn them off once you don't need them, because otherwise you won't be able to draw freely. Now when our perspective grid is ready, it is time to actually start drawing the background. I start with what I'll call the outline of the scene, the basic shapes which I will later draw details onto, like walls, shelves or buildings. Just follow the perspective grid to draw them. Once that is done, it's time to draw the other objects. I always compile a ton of references for all the little details I want to put in the scene, and then keep them on the side while I'll draw. Try to fill up as much space as I can, but putting the most details into the focal point of the drawing. Also when line arting, make sure to use different line sizes to make the background line art a bit easier on the eyes. When drawing cityscapes, I try to add to the basic shape of the building a lot of stuff that will give it more dimension, such as windows, balconies, vents. This will make the building look a lot more interesting. For drawing plants, I like to use border effect, which creates an outline around the color on a layer. This automatically makes it look like there's line art there. Either draw them by hand or use a downloaded plant brush. Once everything is drawn, I color the entire drawing with a single base color. Usually don't do grayscale, but that's also a good method. Then I create another layer where I color with a light color, creating lighting. I like to use dramatic lighting to put focus on the character, to make the details in the background pop more. I either make the light fall on the character head on or from the back. After the lighting is done, I like to put a slightly warmer hue on the border of the lighting. This creates a light scattering effect. Once this is done, I make another layer set to multiply or overlay mode and do flat coloring. I always try to make the background color scheme fit the color scheme of the character, and I recommend using a limited color palette, which will make the drawing look less chaotic. Usually start with neutral colors like grays and brown, then pick 2 or 3 contrasting colors which I will use throughout the drawing. When designing labels, I also use limited color palettes and reuse designs by changing their colors. For text, I just do some random scribbles because it gets tiring trying to come up with actual words. I also recommend using references for signs and other objects. To make sure everything looks okay, I switch the layer mode to normal, to see what the colors look like without layer mode. I also often check how the drawing looks in grayscale, to see if anything looks off. Once everything is colored, it's time to do shading. I create another layer set to multiply mode and use a darker color to shade. Then I select a single object and create a gradient with the same color going from the bottom of the object. This is a quick and easy way to make everything look more three-dimensional. I do more detailed rendering on shiny objects, such as metal, glass or pottery, by adding 2 highlights, one with a warm color and one with a cold color, on either side of the object. And that is pretty much the entire process. I hope this is somewhat helpful. Thank you for watching.